Welcome everybody to the Intro to Art Development. So to start off, what is game art? So it's the visual and aesthetic aspects of a game. So anything that you see, or I mean, technically, if you want to lump music into this, it can also be considered art and programming. We're talking about the visual aspects. So everything that you see with your eyeballs. So all the actual aesthetic design parts, anything that goes into that, that's all game art in our sense. So what goes into that? There's a lot of hard skills that we'll get into in later workshops because there are a lot to cover, a lot of specific things that not everybody's super interested in. But the soft skills like design, direction, communication, and stuff we're also not really going to get into here, but those are things we will be able to cover in less time with preferably everybody at a later date. So some common types of game artists, whenever you go look at like applications and stuff, these are probably the four that you will see. Environment artists. So environment artists are going to be focused on the levels, the environments that the games take place in. So, your open world games are going to have a lot of environment artists. They're going to be doing rocks and trees and old ruins and grass.
And putting it all together.
Then you have character artists. That's pretty competitive positions because people like to draw characters. You can have, it mostly goes through concept art phases where people will be sketching up different designs for characters. That's the whole character design element. Then you get into the more technical aspects of making an actual asset for your game, whether that's a 2D asset for a sprite sheet or making a whole 3D model and props to go along with it, the animation rig, all the animations. Then you have visual effects artists where you can kind of combine a couple things together. The base elements that are commonly used in visual effects are 2D like textures that are done in flipbook style. So you have typically a flipbook is basically a 4-panel animation. And it'll flip through those 4 panels at a specific frame rate. Think of a dust cloud, right? First panel is the dust cloud appears. Second panel, it starts to fade. Third panel, it's mostly faded. Fourth panel, it's pretty much gone. And so you do a little flip book there, and then you put that on a pane and a particle system, and you shoot it out in the world, and it looks like smoke. And that's visual effects. Stuff like that. Some more examples of higher fidelity stuff down here. And then technical artists. Technical artists are basically the nerdy artists, the ones that, we're all nerds, but the ones that like to do all the programming and the math. And, if you ever played with a graphing calculator and made pretty shapes, technical art is probably a good fit for you. All right, so now I will hand it over to Jayden to talk about 2D.
Yeah.
I'm very bad at it.
So I think the resident 2D person, I guess, here.
Yeah.
But basically what constitutes 2D art, and it's really just anything that isn't, 3-dimensional, and that can constitute a lot of stuff even in 3D games. So this could include, as for 2D games though, that would really be sprite sheets, which is what's seen on the right. I'm very bad with my right and left, but up in the top. So that would be a sprite sheet of a bunch of different items. It can also be traditional animation, which would be lower that. That's actually an animation that I found on ArtStation, which I will talk about a little bit later. UI, so making all those buttons and making the user experience, that's mainly prevalent in also 3D games. Obviously you need a button for everything, and you need logos, and you need this is how many Robo-Bucks you bought or something like that. Everything has an icon, and that's what 2D art is meant for in 3D games a lot of the time. And then, of course, we talked about character design and then making character assets as well, like their weapons or anything like that, or even the character itself. There's the environment assets, which would be, really just a crate or something that you can even break. So they would also have to make it a broken version as well. So, and then there's VFX, which is, anytime you shoot a gun or something like that, that's also the blast is there. Concept art, and there's it just goes on and on and on. There's so many things 2D art goes into, not only in just a pure 2D game, but also hybrids as well as pure 3D. But yeah. So it's important to talk about the styles of 2D. I have 3 of my favorite 2D games on here. So I have Stardew Valley, which is a really wonderful example of pixel art because it just shows even though it's something very simple and it doesn't have it still has a giant level of detail. And then as you go into, you can also have more realistic styles. Those are less common, but still very pretty. Those are usually meant in hybrid games where it's like maybe a 3D environment and a 2D character. And then there's stylized, which I think, other than pixel art, is the largest one because it encompasses a lot more. Like vector in terms of like Angry Birds, that's vector art. But making it stylized is definitely one of my personal favorites because there's a lot of things you can do with it. You can really make it your own with any style that you want. But yeah, so here's one of my favorite parts. But 2D art programs. So for pixel art, there's a wonderful, wonderful free program. It's called Piskel, and it's online on the web. You can no longer make an account because they shut down their like data servers, so you can't have an account anymore. But you can still save like the type of file on your computer and just pull it back up. And then there's a paid thing, which is a sprite. That one's really, really cool. It's a lot more complex and it has a lot more options, a lot more editability. So if you're looking for a paid option and you love pixel art, that one's definitely the way to go. The actual drawing program I use personally is Clip Studio Paint. I know they're going to like a monthly trial now, which really sucks. But as long as you don't update, you don't have to. And if you pirate any of these, I won't say anything. In fact, I can point you to some resources to pirate them, as I've done that before. Yeah. Sorry.
R.
Yeah. Whoopsie. I don't encourage it though. Don't DM me if you want.
Don't DM us if you're looking.
Don't DM us if you're looking to be a little rascal pirate. On all of these computers, there is Adobe, the whole Adobe suite, which has context in 3D as well, because there's a bunch of cool stuff in there, like Substance Painter. But there's Adobe Illustrate on all these computers, as well as wonderful drawing tablets. So please come in here if you're looking to draw and you don't have the resources at your home computer, or like you don't have a drawing tablet or anything like that. Another one is Paint Tool Sci. That one's lost a bit recently, but that one's also paid. It's a pretty old program, but it's very versatile, and like you can make a bunch of different cool brushes, so a lot of people love it and stand by it and will never change. Procreate is the big one on the iPad. Krita and Fire Alpaca and GIMP are the free ones that you can download on any really computer. They're good for being free. So if you are looking to start and you don't want to like pay for anything, those are definitely the way to go. I personally like Fire Alpaca the best. That's where I started. So out of those three, I like that one the best. But yeah, so heck, even scan in a sketched out thing on paper and edit it in whatever editor, like crop out, make it transparent, and put it in a game. Like, I feel like that would look cool anyways. So use MS Paint. Jack uses MS Paint. I don't know if he's in there.
Yeah, he's in the Unity room.
Okay, cool. Then he won't hear me talking about MS Paint because that's all he uses. He's made some wonderful things with them. Yeah, so when it comes to using your art, obviously in here we mainly focus on Unity. When it comes to 2D, Unreal has some like 2D applications as well. I wouldn't suggest it for making a full 2D game, but so we definitely focus on Unity when you want to make a 2D game. But that's how it would look if you literally put a sprite and just put a movement thing on it and just jumped around in there. But that's literally just a transparent image on there. And that's their character. If they animated it, that would be a sprite sheet, and it would just go through the different sprites and be animated whenever they run. So another thing I love to say is ArtStation. That's a wonderful place to get like inspiration. They have 3D, 2D. It's incredible. Not only for character design, but also people post their stuff when they are making games and go, look at this cool asset I made. Like, look at that, hire me. So it's also a good way to like get yourself out there, make a portfolio, stuff like that. And then of course, just fun. It's always fun. But yeah, so I will hand it back to Mitchell.
We're going across the third dimension, y'all. All right.
Going on the Z-axis.
The Z-axis. All right. So who here has actually touched a 3D model before? Okay, so none of you. That's good. So this might be a little bit of a retread for some of you, but for anyone who hasn't, this is really foundational and important information. So basically, what a 3D object is in a game is essentially a bunch of computer numbers that are making a couple objects. So the main object is the mesh. You can kind of see that here. That's this wireframe around this guy, and the wireframe and the bunny down here. These are meshes. The more triangles that your mesh has, we call it a higher density mesh, which means there's a lot more information for the computer to keep track of, and therefore it takes a lot more rendering computer power to render that object. So a mesh is comprised of vertices, which are all the little points that you see between the triangles, edges, which are the lines, and then the faces, which are the gray bits, or the bits between the triangles. Now, faces also have what are called normals. So essentially, the back side of a face is transparent, and then the front side of the face, which is the normal, which direction the face is facing, is like opaque and has a color. So that can be used in a lot of different ways to do cool things. Like if you've ever seen a lantern in a game, usually what that is it is a mesh with the normals flipped on the glass part, and then it has an actual thing on the inside. So you can see through the glass part, but then when you see the back side of the other side of the glass, you'll actually see the rendered texture. So you can kind of see inside out. I'll show it later when I do my demonstration. Anyways, the next part is textures and UVs. So essentially, this is what this is down here. This is the example horrifying mesh that I found, but it was a good example with textures. So you have the mesh here, and then that gets unwrapped in what's called a UV map. So you're basically cutting this up like a piece of origami, and you're laying it out flat on a 2D image. Once you've done that, then you're going to take whatever textures you want to make. So there's usually what's called, the three basic ones that you're going to have are a diffuse, which is your color, which you can see here. You're going to have a normal, which is all your bumps and stuff. So like basically, normally you can't fake detail. The best example I have for this is your hand. If everyone wants to look at their hand, if you kind of move your fingers around, you'll see tendons in there on your hand. That's a lot of detail to put on someone's, in a model. It'd be really high density to put all that detail there. So instead, what games do is they have the hand be flat mesh-wise, and then they use a normal map to fake the light and say, okay, draw a shadow here, draw a light part there, make some shadows there. And even though it is physically flat, it'll look like it's not flat. That's what a normal map does. All right, and then the final thing is basically a material is the compositing of these textures and these UVs into one solid thing that you can plop on a 3D object and say this 3D object has this material, and then it'll add the material. So that's what this guy has mapped onto him. All these textures are plugged into a material. He has that material, and so he looks like that. Kind of disgusting, but beauty is relative. So then these are some examples of other materials that you can make. They're just mapped onto spheres. So you have like rock material, metal, bricks, planets if you want to. You can get really complicated with modern procedural texturing. But yeah. So how is it used once you've made this 3D object? So the main ways that it's used are you have static assets, which are assets, are 3D objects in this case. Assets are 3D objects. Static assets are basically the objects that are going to be staying still in your game. They're not going to move. Like in Unity, there's like a checkbox that you do to say it's static. In Unreal, it's an entire different type of object that you have to do whenever you import it. But basically, a static object is not going to move. It's stuck there. That's usually going to be like your terrain, so your ground, any roads that you're going to have, buildings, structures, like the physical parts of your environment, like this floor, this TV, this table, right? Then you're going to have dynamic assets, which are basically anything that is animated or anything that is interacting with physics. So props like you see in Half-Life here has like a robust physics engine. Those are all dynamic. The grass here, I don't know if you can really tell, but it's actually kind of swaying a little bit. That's dynamic. The character itself is also animated, and that's dynamic. And the way character animation works, which I'll do a little bit later in my demonstration as well, is you have what's called a rig here. And then you, instead of actually drawing each frame by hand, you pose the model with the rig. You say, okay, move the arm here, move the arm here, move the head like this, capture the keyframe, and then you can just move it to the next position, capture the keyframe, and keep moving it. And there's a lot of other tools that can kind of help make that as smooth as possible. So, styles of 3D. So, three main styles for 3D. There is low poly, which is basically the aesthetic of low poly, but not actually low poly. Sometimes it's even more high poly than low poly stuff. Anyways, it's using the actual mesh shape, the idea of like all these angular triangles and everything, as like an artistic style that you see before you even add textures. It's usually done with flat colors, minimal actually, like, getting a texture in UV mapping. So you just make the shape of it, and then the actual shape of it kind of does the visual work for you. That's the idea behind it. Stylized has stuff like over here where it's not super realistic, but it gets the idea across. It uses more 2D stylization aspects, like you're forcing perspective, you're stretching just stuff down, just kind of pushing shapes to be more appealing in certain ways, or cartoony, I guess. And then you have realistic, which is trying to do the most realistic rendering as possible, and that's where you'll see a lot of these normal maps here get used in realistic rendering. The term for that is called PBR, or physical-based rendering, because it's trying to simulate the physics of light actually hitting realistic objects. So I talked about how low poly art style is not exactly low poly. So in games, pretty much everything you see is low poly. There's not really any high poly meshes in a game that you've ever seen by terms of what 3D models get used for. You see in a movie, like Thanos is always a good example. In a movie, he's got like a big purple face. It's complicated. That's a high poly model. That's really realistic, high definition. And if you've ever seen a game before, it doesn't look nearly as good as that, because what it's essentially doing is it's taking high poly model that looks really good like this, and then they're retopologizing it and taking the 8+ million polygons and reducing it to under 1,000, just to get the base shape down. And then all that detail that you have here, you bake into your normal map that I talked about. And baking is essentially you set the texture up and you tell the computer, okay, look at all the light that's on it right now, and bake out what light hits it where it's bumpy and everything, and bake that down into a map that I can put on a texture. And then you can take this sort of smooth looking guy here, where he's not very high detail, and then you can add the normal map, and he'll have a lot more detail afterwards, even though he's low poly like this guy was. So what's more important than having high density meshes and really high detail like this, because you can kind of bake it down in normals, is having good edge flow or good topology. So that's kind of illustrated here, where someone's taken a high density mesh. This is the cave troll from Lord of the Rings. It's ZBrush's favorite example they like to use. But basically, the lines you see here are the essential lines that they do whenever they do a retopology. So this is like the first major lines they'll draw out to make sure they're getting the structure of the face right. And then once they've kind of got those down, they like where they're sitting, then they go in and fill in all the white parts between. So you'll see he's got kind of yellow rings around his eyes. He's got blue rings kind of around his skeletal shape of his face. This kind of red ring goes around the nose. This green ring goes around the mouth, and so on. So basically, there's a lot of resources where you can go and learn about the specifics of how to set this up. But essentially, the idea is just make sure your edges are nice and flowing, because when something is stretching and moving, if the edge flow is not good, it's going to warp the texture underneath. Because the idea is that you have this UV map here, right? And then that's not going to change. That's going to stay like it is. It's not going to change when you're animating something. So you want to make sure that whenever something is animating, it's not stretching this one face out like this, and then all the image pixel density that's in that one space on that image, on that face, is getting stretched across this. So it's going to look really pixelated and gross and weird. So you want to just make sure that you have good setups and your edges flow nicely. You'll also notice that all the squares here, well, not exactly the same, they're roughly the same size. You don't want to have one that's like a gigantic square back here that's empty, and then a bunch of really small squares up in the front. You want to have them roughly be somewhat similar in size. All right, so software. So the main software that we use is Blender, because it's open source, it's free, and it can do pretty much anything the other ones can do, just not as good, but for a lot cheaper. It's a great software. I love it. It's what I've started in. It's what most people I know started in. It's great. Maya is what's used in a lot of professional development studios still. It has a lot of extra stuff to make things like UV unwrapping a lot easier. You're like the Twitch stream boogeyman. Oh. I'm terrified.
Okay, yay! Okay.
All right, but yeah, Maya is really high, a lot of money. It's like, I don't even know how much. It's like $2,000 or something. It's expensive.
Yeah. They have it on these computers.
Yes, that's another thing.
So.
Yes.
And students get them free.
So if you want to get Maya, luckily while you're here at the university, we have it on all the computers around campus, not just in here. And also, if you sign up on the Autodesk website with your student account, you can get it. I think for the 4 years, I've known people that they don't cancel your student account until like a couple years after you leave, so you can get it for a couple years after you've graduated as well. Yeah.
As long as your student ID still works.
As long as it still works. And then the final one is ZBrush, which is the premier software for sculpting. A lot of great tools for anything sculpting. If you're looking to be a professional sculptor, you probably want to look into getting your hands on ZBrush. I think we also have those on school computers, right?
Yes.
So yeah.
As someone who started learning on 3ds Max, don't. Don't.
3ds Max is really good for like architectural realistic rendering or maybe like movie VFX. It's not great. It's kind of old. It's poopy.
It's bad.
Cinema
It was
4D
free.
is really good
but
for like movie style visual
for
effects as
students.
well. And then Houdini is a lot more of procedural based stuff. So if you've seen like, I don't know if anyone's seen like the more procedural stuff, like hair is a thing that they do in Houdini. If you've seen like really high definition, like grass, all the psychedelic stuff from Doctor Strange movies was probably done in Houdini, stuff like that. And then finally, a word on technical art. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into technical art that I don't really have time to go into now. But basically, we'll be doing a deep dive into it later. But for now, just understand that it's the bridge, like the Venn diagram. You have all your programmers and you have all your artists. And then right in there in the between zone are your technical artists.
That's my background on my computer. So that's the
Great
little
image.
evil guy in the middle.
Do you
That's
want to
covered
play
up.
Twitch?
Yeah, there you go. That's my
Oh, I love
background.
Buff Apple. That's awesome.
Oh, thank you. Wait, this? No, that's a Junibro. It's like Junimo, but it's buff, so it's a Junibro.
I don't know what Junimo is.
It's from Stardew Valley.
I haven't played that game.
All right.
I need to.
You don't need to disappoint.
I'm sorry, I'm busy.
Well, be less busy.
Oh,
Play
okay.
the game.
Okay.
I have 550 hours. You can dedicate at least 2.
All right. I gotta buy it first. Anyways.
Buy it for you. I
Okay.
swear.
Well, you know, if you want to, go for it. I'll save $20.
Steam gift.
All right. Anyways, so essentially, technical art combines aspects of 2D art and 3D art to make a lot of different things. So you'll see here, there's some examples. If you're bad at doing traditional 2D animation, lucky for you, there's a lot of tools out there for doing 3D style rigs and skeletons, but on a 2D plane. So you can do some simple animations like that. Visual effects, also, as we talked about earlier, use a lot of 2D where you'll have flip books or different particle designs that you can put on particle systems. And then you also need to have a good understanding of 3D art if you want to use meshes for your particles or vector math in 3D to do all your particle system shapes and stuff. Another thing to note is that sometimes you'll use shapes for VFX that won't actually be seen so much. For example, these little discs here in the center. These are actually just a circle mesh, probably, and it's using that to do the shape of the effect. Or it's a cylinder. I don't know exactly. But basically, you can use different shapes to kind of help form your particle systems as well. Another thing is 3D animation. The biggest thing with 3D animation for characters especially are what are called rigs, which is essentially setting up the skeleton. I'll probably do a whole workshop on that just for rigging and animation. Have you had experience with that, Jayden? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. We'll both do one. I'll do it a little bit today, very simple one. But basically, there's a lot that goes into making a character rig, not just putting the bones in there. There's a lot of settings and stuff to make it set up so you can simulate physics with certain aspects. You can do what are called inverse kinematics. So instead of saying, I want to move this bone here and this bone here and this bone here, you can just move the arm, the hand bone, and it'll move all of it for you. Makes things a lot easier. Last thing is shaders. So this is basically the graphics coding. The most common way that this is used, and that you've probably seen it before, is toon shading or cell shading. Breath of the Wild is a great example, where you have basically a flat color, a darker version of that color, and then a highlight that is put on the outside. It's like a white or a brighter version of the color. And that's it. So now we're going to move on to a demonstration phase.
You can go first.
I'm going to go first?
Yeah.
I was going to prepare. Okay. All right,
Dude,
guys.
I don't know how to.
Speed modeling time. This is
don't
my
know-
half-finished chest that I was working on.
I don't know how to share this.
Okay.
I don't know how to share my screen.
You just plug it in.
I don't have a USB-C.
Okay, that's fair. You have a USB-C.
Oh, I do. Wait, no, I have it, but it's for my tablet. So I'm already using it.
Anyways,
That's right.
so this is my chest that I'm working on. Don't worry about following along exactly. I'm just trying to show some concepts here. So essentially what I'm doing here is I'm building out the mesh. And I can actually go in here and show you that normals thing I was talking about earlier. If you want to see this while you're working on, Blender doesn't automatically have this turned on, but whenever you are putting something like this into a game engine, it will be turned on automatically. And I don't think you can even turn it off. So basically all your faces will render like this in any game engine that you put it in. So you'll have this this back face here. You can see that I'm able to see through to the top part there. So on the back side of the normal, it's upside down. And I think there's a way of visualizing this. I'm not sure, but anyways. You can flip normals as well. So if I wanted to flip the normals, I can go here and I can flip my normals. Now it's inside out. Very cool. Nice. All right, so I've got myself my chest and my lid for my chest, and we're gonna add some things to it. So I got a bone here to start. This is for my armature for animation. So I'm gonna go in here. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna join these two together. So now this is, instead of being two separate meshes, this is one mesh with two vertex groups. So vertex group is basically a separate group of contained vertices. So think like one 3D shape is a vertex group. And then you can have multiple 3D shapes together that comprises one total mesh. Let's do that. All right. This, edits. Oh, come on. Welcome. Or were there no seats? Okay, well.
I can go for it.
You got that, Jayden? Thank you.
Oh, I can go get a seat.
All right, I'm gonna keep working. They got that. So now I've added my bones to my mesh here. So I've got a bone for the actual body of this thing. And you'll see that they're connected here, and it kind of looks a little wonky. What I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna get rid of the parent to this bone. So I'm gonna go to the Bones Relations tab, get rid of its parent. And now this bone and the other bone are not exactly connected. Come on. But they're still part of the same armature. So you'll actually notice here that I'll reattach the parent. So do that. But notice now that the connected checkbox is not done. And so it'll have this dotted line here. That means now this is technically, so if the idea behind parenting is that if I move this bone, this one will move with it. But if I move this bone, this one will not move. So it's the idea of, okay, if I move my shoulder, my entire arm is going to move, right? If I move my hand, though, my shoulder's not going to move. So that's the idea of like a hierarchy of bones. All right. So once you've done that, you will add weights to your model. So this is going to be basically telling each bone where it has control over. For us, this is pretty easy. We're just going to assign this by vertex group and say this bone controls the lid and this bone controls the bottom. So let's go here. We need to go to this. We got to do. Nope. There we go. So the way this works is it'll do a scale from blue to red. Blue means that the bone has no control, and red means that the bone has 100% control. I forgot that I have to pair these. So first thing, before you do that, is you have to tell this armature that it's actually connected to this mesh. I'll do Control P, which is the shortcut for set parent. I will set the parent with empty groups. This says that now if I go over to the, what is it? It'll be weight paint mode. There we go. So you'll see in the vertex groups here, these are the vertex groups for each bone. So if I left click on a bone, it has an empty group. But if I hit L to select this entire thing here, I can assign it. And if I go back out, now this bone has 100% or red on the bottom. And if I click this one, I can do the same thing, but on the other one, and I can assign it. And now that one has 100% control over the lid. So this one has the bottom, this one has the lid. So now I can go back into object mode, which is just sort of like your way of dealing with different objects. There's meshes and armatures, a lot of different types of objects. Then we have pose mode, where we can actually move our skeleton around and pose it. And so I will now be able to open and close the chest. So our chest looks kind of gray right now, kind of boring, kind of dull. We're gonna fix that. We're gonna add a texture to it. To do that, we're gonna need to unwrap the mesh. So this is usually the laborious and annoying and long part of any model. People generally don't like it, which is why Maya's nice for doing a lot of the work for you. Blender tries. It has a way of doing this. So if I select all this, I'll do Smart UV Projects, and that'll just do it for me. And we can go over to UV editing and see what it does here. It didn't do a terrible job, but this is a pretty simple mesh. But anything that's more complicated, it tends to have some issues with. So it's best to learn good practices for how to do this. So I'm going to try to do it the old-fashioned way and show you some good practices. So the way that you do UV unwrapping is you're essentially cutting seams into your object. So I'm going to go to U to open up the UV mapping menu here, and then I'm going to mark a seam. And you'll see that this turns red now. So what that essentially means is, imagine I have my folded up paper chest. What I'm doing there is I'm taking my X-Acto knife and I'm cutting where it says that red line is. That way that'll be where the cut goes so I can lay it out flat. So I'll try to kind of separate this mesh into different parts. So we have this side here. You can also, oh, come on. Mark that seam. That seam. Okay, so now I have marked all my seams on the bottom. And so what I should be able to do now is select the bottom and unwrap it. So now it's been put out into the 5 different parts I have. I have the top. I can do, oh, hold on. If you go into face select mode, so you'll notice up here, well, does it have it up here? Should normally have it. Anyways, I'm selecting 1, 2, 3 on the keyboard here, or like on the top of my keyboard. 1 is vertices, which is what I've been, this is the basic mode, so all the different points. 2 are the edges, which is what I've been using. And then 3 is the faces. So whenever you're in face select mode, a little handy dandy feature is instead of selecting an entire mesh, it'll actually select all the different UV islands, so we can see each different part. So we have the bottom there, got our front side, our other side, got this side, this side, and then we also have the side on the interior here. Get to it. There we go. Just like that. And then to help us out, what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a new mesh or a new texture, and we're just going to call it UV test. And then this is going to be a UV grid. And this is basically just going to be a big grid of colors and plus signs that'll help us map out the size, because we want to have an average size to all of our quads here. So you actually notice here that these are nice big and chunky squares, but then down here I have these sort of stretched out rectangles. That's not good. So I want to actually see if I can make these into squares. What I'm doing here is I'm adding loop cuts. I don't need any there. All right. So I'm in the solid view mode as well. So Blender has a couple different view modes. Most software do. So the rendered mode is what the actual finished product will look like. I don't really have many lights in my scene, so yeah, this is pretty basic, not very different, but it's just going to look like it would with my where's it at? My one sunlight right here, shining down on it, and then I can hit 0 to see what it looks like in camera. All right. Whatever. So now we'll do the actual top part, and you'll notice here this is another bad thing is I have this as an entire face. This is what we call an n-gon. So in modeling, we want everything to be quads, which are essentially the squares. But this is an n-gon, which means that it has n number of vertices. It's not 4. So we want to try to cut this down to get it to be 4. We'll notice here that we actually have some nice strips going across the top of our mesh. So we can actually add some subdivisions to this edge here. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. There we go. And we will do subdivide. This has got how many? We got what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we'll do this. Subdivide again. Now we have 4. And we'll end up with 8. And we can work with that. Now, if you do have to not do a quad, the only other option is you usually want to have a triangle. So I'll add a triangle there, and then everywhere else I will have quads. In the future, I will also have an add-on called Screencast Keys that will show you all the different shortcut buttons I'm pressing, but a little bit on the rushed side today getting this ready, so did not have time for that. There we go. So now that looks a lot better, and we'll do the same thing over on this side. You'll kind of notice it's a little weird for me to work on this and then also have this other mesh down here. So what I can actually do is I can hide that with H, and then I can use Alt-H to show it again. So I'll hide it for now. Then I can work with my mesh here. I'll actually move down to material preview so I can see what I'm doing better. Essentially what I'm doing here is I'm just using a hotkey that joins 2 meshes along a plane. So they have to have a normal to move across, which in this case is a face. Give myself carpal tunnel like this. Squat. All right. All right. There we go. So now our chest looks much better. We'll do the same thing on the bottom here, and we'll add some quads. Oop, not there. Come on. This is a lot of 3D modeling. It's just kind of chill and slow. It's like that.
Sometimes if my hand is over the mouse for too long, like my pinky gets numb because it's not being used. And it, yeah.
All right, so I have some extra vertices here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click. I'm going to dissolve those vertices. And because there are surrounding edges and vertices near them, they'll just disappear. If you try to dissolve vertices and there's not something nearby for them to like jump to, you'll have some problems. But basically, as long as they're just kind of extras that you don't need, it'll take care of it. It's a good way to clean up. Oh, what do you mean intersection? There we go. Okay. Does anyone have any questions so far? I'm kind of in the middle of doing some monotonous stuff here. No questions? What key am I hitting? J, yeah. There we go. So now, this is all nice and unwrapped. So we'll go here, we'll use selection tools. I'll go back to edge selects, it's a little easier. See what I'm doing. So now I'll select this. I will do U to mark a seam. I will mark a seam all along the sides here. How's your prep work going, Jayden? Yeah.
Isn't it great?
Oh, it looks great.
Uh,
Is that link?
yeah.
Nice.
It's just I'm drawing a doodle so that we can animate it.
Yeah. Okay. And we're gonna do this here. So essentially, the philosophy for doing UV unwrapping is really just trying to break your model down into chunks. So I'm trying to look for anywhere that there's like a obvious thing that I can split off. So these like bands here, I can pretty easily split those off. But then I have to be careful because if I do that, then I'm going to split these this section right here, which I can go to 3 here. You can see all my different islands. That's going to be its own separate island now. I don't really know if I want to do that. So I might just leave the bands on. So I can go back and I can clear that seam. And we'll see how it looks just like it is. So we'll hit A, select everything. It's a little hard to see the UVs, but I'll switch it real quick in a second. We'll unwrap it. And then we will see. Now you'll notice that we cannot see the texture over here on this actual thing. That's because what we need to do is we need to take and add a material. So it's already got a material baked into it, but I'll just make a new one for kicks. Okay, fine. I'll make a material number 1. We'll get rid of that material. I mean, what? Why? Okay.
It's you today.
All right, anyways. Now we can go over into shading, which is like the material editor. And we'll have our material. So this is basically just a big node with all of our inputs that we can put stuff into. So we'll search for an image texture to plug in to our color. That's all we're really worried about right now. We'll select the UV test image that we generated. We'll plug that into our base color, and there we go. So now we'll see that there's a little bit of stretching here. This isn't perfect, but it's close enough that I'm not worried about it right now. Essentially what you want to do is you would do this, and then you want to make sure all of these are both square and roughly the same size. And that's how you have these are called essentially, they're called texels. Since pixels are dynamic depending on like what you're doing, you're like depending on the size of your texture or how big your model is. We measure texture density in texels, which are these squares you see here. And so you want to make sure that your texel density, which is a great set right here, this is nice and square, and this down here is all nice and square. Then you see this is stretched, and that is because if we go look at the UVs, okay, come on, there we go. If we go look at the UVs for this guy here, we'll see that it is, oh God, it is square over here, but it is rectangular here, and that's why we're getting this stretch that you see. And so what we can do is stretch this along the x-axis so we get it nice and straight. Like that. And we'll do the same thing for the other side. All right. And now I'm going to get rid of this image that we have back here just so I can come on. Just make a new image, fine. Be that way. Yeah. There we go. All right. Much easier to see now, I hope. These are all of our UVs. They're kind of messy right now, all overlaid on top of each other. So what we want to do is make sure that all the UVs are laid out over the same thing. So one helpful trick is that you'll notice that a lot of these are actually really similar because they are like essentially the same symmetrical shape. And with those, since they'll likely have the same texture overlaid on them, we overlap the UVs on top of each other. We stack them. And so you can kind of get really close with it. You can use the arrow keys once you've got something selected. Oh, come on. You know I have this selected. Oh, I gotta do G. There we go. So I can just overlap this as perfectly as possible. There we go. And then I'll keep finding those. putting them there. As you can see, UVs are not the most fun part of 3D modeling. Who here thinks they are fun? Great, like I expected. All right. Oh. Another helpful thing to note is that you don't have to keep everything on the texture while you're working on it. You can kind of just put something over there. Just make sure you don't forget it, because if it's not on the texture here, it will just show up as like pink or black, depending on your render engine, and it'll look bad. So just make sure once you're done, everything is on this square here in the center. But before that, you can kind of move stuff away if you need some space to maneuver things. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
So what do you do if the object that you're trying to like give texture? What if it's too big to fit on the little like the black square that you have now? Because you moved it off of the square, but you said make sure it goes back on. What if your object has some? What if it's too big to fit on the square?
So the idea here is you can always, it's basically you have an infinite scale with UVs. I can scale this down really small. We can just keep going. This is teeny tiny, and we can zoom in, and then it can get even more teeny tiny. And the reason, this is where we get into texels versus pixels, because this is infinite right here that I'm working with, but the pixels that I'm working with are set by the amount of pixels that I have in the image that I generate. So at the moment, you can't really tell anything because it's all black, but if and the UV grid as well is procedural, and we can't zoom in on it, but if you have a normal texture that's, say, 256 by 256 pixels, eventually if you make your thing small enough, it will get to the point where it's really pixelated. And so the solution is to have, all your scaled down UVs really small, just make a really high resolution texture. And another way to save space is doing the stacking thing that we're talking about. That'll save space. And packing them together, so that's a helpful thing. We're removing these off so we have a clear visual space to work with, and then we're going to pack them where we're going to try and get them as close together as we can. So right now we're just kind of clearing up our space so that we can do that. You'll see here this is even still tracking here because the UV grid is like procedural. It doesn't matter where I put it, it'll still track on there. But if this was a real texture, it would care. Okay, you're gonna make a mirror, aren't you? So another thing you'll notice sometimes is that a lot of these, even though they do line up, they don't exactly line up, and that's usually because they're not mirrored. Because whenever you take two sides of something, it's going to have the opposite of the effect. So you usually just need to mirror it. So now that this one matches up with that one. Exactly. Sort of how your left and right hand, your thumbs are both on the outside on both, right? But if you want your thumb to be on the same side, you got to mirror your hand. Now they're both on the same side.
A lot of hand analogies.
Well, hands are, everyone got them,
Everyone do got them. Well, never mind.
Okay. Most people got them.
Most people got them.
A good 95% or more.
Hopefully a bit more than that.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I went with a low estimate just in case.
Okay.
Oh, God.
How many people have hands?
Is it going to fact check me?
Yes. It's our job.
It's your job.
Make you feel wrong.
All right with feeling wrong. I'm used to that. Trust me, as an artist, that's the thing, someone had mentioned this earlier. Who here feels like their art sucks? Yeah, that's how it's supposed to feel. That's what being an artist means. So no matter how good you get, you could be the best artist in the world. You'll never probably be the best. That's just kind of impossible. Everyone's got their own unique style. If you are one of the best, you're probably going to be basically right on par with like 15 at least other people that are just as good, if not better, and have their own unique style that combats with yours. Essentially, the thing you're chasing, you're always going to have this gap. And that's when you get better, this is going to go up. And it's just going to keep doing that forever and ever and ever. And the wider this gets, shorten everything, with time you'll make it a little bit shorter, but then depending on your preference, it'll always go up. So if you feel like your art sucks, don't worry, it doesn't. Everyone starts somewhere. I thought my art sucked, but hey, people paid me for it. So that's what's important. At the end of the day, are people going to pay you for it? Yes, cool, you're an artist. You're a good artist at that point. If they don't pay you for it, you're still technically an artist. You just don't get paid for your art. Not a technical artist, but technically an artist.
Sometimes you might do technical art for free, in which case you're still technically a technical artist.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I said, we're a funny bunch.
We're super, we're hilarious.
We're way funnier than
Those other Unity guys.
those Unity guys over there. Yeah,
Gosh.
we're cool. We're art people.
Are they saying beep boop I code in C# or something?
Yeah. We only know English.
Who needs coding languages when you already got a great language right there?
Yeah. Look at that. Like we got our own syntax. That's all I'm saying. Anyone take automata? Come on. Set of words. What was it? Set of strings. There we go. We repeat it every class, yet I still can't remember which one it is. We get there though. We get there.
Okay. Yeah.
So when you move the things and it moves, I still don't really remember all the technical terms, but you move them around on the left side and it changes where things are located on the right side, like it slides them around.
Yeah. So essentially, this is a map. All of these details here. So basically, the part of the texture, which is the texture is the image that you're using here. The part of the texture that's being used here on this side is going to be sampled from wherever you put the UV. So right here, this guy. Wherever I put this is where this is going to sample from. So you'll see that it's moving with it.
Okay. So I was wondering, like, is it a problem that when you move the UVs, it changes the texture? Like, do you need to do anything to make sure that it doesn't do that, or is it not usually a problem?
That's usually fine, because essentially what you'll do is you'll have your texture there, and you'll usually just start with a blank texture, and then you'll do your UV mapping first, which is what we're doing. And then after you've gotten your UVs set and your texels are all good, you know that you can start painting without having to worry about any weird stretching.
Okay.
So that's what I'm doing right now is I'm doing the mapping part of it where I'm making sure that it's all nice and even. I'm not going to run into any weird thing where I draw like a short line and it turns into a really big line, anything like that.
Okay.
Yeah, the actual like painted finished texture part is after this. I'm mostly just kind of getting ahead of myself, I guess, with talking about theory. Ah, come on. All right, so it's front of our chest here. Since the front and the back of our chest are likely going to have different textures, we'll actually make these two. Try to make them the same width. Not like that, but we want to have them be separate. Because the front of our chest will likely have like a lock, the back will likely have some hinges. They'll be different, so we don't want to overlap them. Yeah, you can type in. I'm just eyeballing it because they were already off. If they start out the same and you want to, like I want to double the size of both of these. I do S for the shortcut for scale, and I type in the value of 2. And then they're both roughly the same ballpark now, so I do S and 2, and now they're the same size,
What's
roughly.
good is that like it follows the same kind of transforms as Unity, and a lot of all the 3D modeling programs, everything really follows because it's the same kind of way of transforming in 3D space. They always have the scale and the move and the rotate, so it's all very like familiar if you're thinking about it in terms of 3D space. So if you know about it in Unity, it's basically the same on here. You're just doing it in a different way. So it's always
Yeah.
nice to make parallels, I guess, with stuff you already know.
Yeah, like hands. I love hands. Hands are great.
We love hands. That's the percentage is going down, and like we just turn around, and then nobody in here has hands.
It's just
We're
they're
like,
magically disappearing,
"What?"
like, whoa!
No one at NC State has hands. Let's be honest, guys.
They got crushed by all the bricks, you know?
Yeah.
What hand?
What hand?
What hand? Hand what?
What defines?
I don't know. No.
No, because it has a different bone structure.
But you know what the bones they both have? Phalanges.
Phalanges.
My favorite bones because they're funny.
Yeah, it's like how all like laces have aglets. That's a cool word. Thanks, Phineas and Ferb.
Thanks, Phineas and Ferb.
Yeah.
Aglet, don't forget it.
I didn't.
I didn't think.
We can tell.
Thank you. Okay, we don't need this. It's the constitutes the area that is
Dangly bits.
attached to your chest muscle.
So if I had a transplant where I took my leg and I replaced it with my arm, would my leg become an arm?
I think it's. Yeah. I guess the definition
If I'm holding a
says.
tennis racket, is the tennis racket part of my hand? What if I super glue it?
We're asking the real questions here. It's like, are French people real people? And the answer is
Oh
no.
my God, Jayden.
What if I screwed it to my hand?
What if I told you no?
So Jayden hates French people. I don't know
do.
why.
You know why.
I do know why.
You know
but
why.
I'm gonna pretend like I don't know why.
You've
So the
heard-
French people don't guillotine me.
Multiple times why I hate the French.
If a person whose hands are paralyzed has
Because
hands.
they didn't say thank you.
Okay. We did it.
Yay!
Now they're not perfect, but I don't care enough right now, so we're just gonna go with it. I think this is actually. Let's see if we can do this. It's SY.
Have you seen amputees? Like before they get cut off?
You really want that to be part of your hand?
Yes.
That's why they get it cut off.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm saying.
That's all I'm saying, guys.
That's what I'm saying.
What if I like got my hands chopped up?
Oh my god.
What animal would it be?
Okay. All right. I'm done with that. 'Cause
Both that and
screw UVs. I don't like them. No one does.
Yeah, we're done with it for now.
Screw that. All right. So now we get to move on to the actual fun part. Texture painting. Woo! All right. So now we have our texture here that we've made for testing your UVs. So we're gonna make a new texture. We're gonna call it. We already made a texture actually. We have an untitled texture. This is our texture. It's black. We're gonna take this texture. We're gonna go into our material that we made, and instead of using UV test as our texture, we're gonna use untitled as our texture. Then we'll go in here and we'll see that we are painting on this texture untitled because it has a little paint drop on it. You can have multiple. I'll get into that later. Then we have our actual painting tools. So we're gonna make brown. This is a chest. Brown. Paint. It's a little dark brown. I don't know if I want that. There we go. Another option is you can always paint on the actual texture itself. So this is essentially a faster way of doing it depending on what you're doing. You can either paint onto the model directly, which is helpful for doing like details for whenever you're like say you want to draw something on like a specific form that's hard to do on 2D. You can draw it on the model itself. The only problem with that is depending on how fast your computer runs and how complex your UVs are, is it can kind of take a little time to calculate the mapping the coloring here to the coloring over there.
And that's why whenever E3 presentations were still a thing, they were like, this many polys can now be seen in our game engine concurrently. And then everyone cheered, and then some people probably didn't know what was going on, but still cheered. It just runs faster with fewer polys, but a lot of game engines now are being able to handle more, which is very lovely to see. Primarily Unreal Engine, but I know that they're coming out with new stuff.
I think a Commodore 64 could run this thing.
Yeah. I'm done with prep.
All right. Well,
So I've just been doing this.
oh, wow.
Little
Damn.
doodle, you like my little doodle?
You look good.
You look handsome?
You do.
Okay, cool. That's what I wanted to hear.
Da-da. This is much more fun with a pen.
Yeah, and that's why we have them.
It doesn't give you nearly as much carpal tunnel, you know?
You want my tablet?
I'm good. I'm almost done.
Actually, no, you'd have to install a driver. So never mind. I just gave you
I have a driver. I have my own Wacom tablet.
This is an XP pen.
Oh, okay, never mind. Okay, well, you know what? I only had $100, so sue me.
They're cheaper.
Actually, don't sue me. I don't have money.
This is cheaper than anything else. XP pen's cheaper than Wacom.
Okay.
If anyone wants a drawing tablet, get an XP pen. They're extremely cheap for the quality. Yeah. Yeah.
I mind
They go on sale a million times a year. They're always like, we have a new sale out, and it's like 1,000,000% off. We're gonna give you money. And I'm like, you sold me. Like, get me on. Like, they're like, we just came out with a new pink one. And I'm like, you got me. I'm there. You XP pen. Yeah. No, they're really good for the quality, like the price, exceptional for the quality versus price ratio, very wonderful. Huion's very good, but too expensive for me. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Wacom tablets
that
are
explains
very
so much.
expensive.
Oh my god.
Whee!
I forgot that I had this extra UV line there. That makes so much sense. I was wondering why it was like not all one piece. All right. So what I'm doing now is it's really a pain in the butt to try to perfectly paint on this and not screw up and paint on something else and have to erase a million times. Trust me, I've done it. Don't do it. It sucks. So I'm going to show you a better way to do it real quick. Once I get all these selected, there we go. All right, so now we can go to this right here, which says paint mask. And so now I will only paint what I have selected in edit mode. Super nice. So I can just make my brush real big and go herder. If it will let me. Come on. Texture, why? Why? Okay.
Can't get this
This is weird. Change the setting by accident? No. F is size. I'm still doing that.
You have to drag it.
It wasn't doing that before. That's weird.
My computer won't.
What's your name again, by the way? Laura. Thank you, Laura.
He's from digital modeling.
I wish I could take that class.
I told you.
I know, but game engines is at the same time, so my major said fuck you.
Language. We're on a Twitch stream. Wait.
How does that work? Okay. All right, I'll take your word for it.
Why is he not connected?
I'm already working 2 jobs this semester, so I don't need anything else to hurt me.
There we go.
Okay.
I don't know why, but
So do the same thing here. I'm gonna just select. Oh no, come on. So some faces. Get that all good. I'll make little hinges here. Do this, that. So now I can go back in here and I can color all this gold as well. There we go. Then we will do a little bit of smearing to soften this up some. It's perfect. It looks great. It's beautiful. Okay.
Justin would get that with 100.
I bet he would. Knowing exactly what I know. Oh, God.
He gave me a 96 on his assignment. He's like, I wish you experimented with sharps. And I'm like, what do you mean you wish I experimented with something? You didn't tell me to experiment with something.
What does experimenting in sharps
like
Even-
marking sharps.
Oh,
In
okay.
terms of that, and I was like,
Is that experimenting?
no, I'm so mad.
All
That
right.
was the one I turned in my rowboat with.
Oh, nice.
And I got a 96.
That's pretty good.
Oh, darn, Justin.
No, it's not good. It's 4% off.
That's true. You
Oh, it
should've
is
got
over
a-
here. Just kidding.
All right, so that's the world's largest key opens this chest. Yeah, so now we have texture painted, and we're going to do a little bit more texture painting to show you the ways that this works. So to make this look more metallic, we're going to do, sure, that. And we're going to make this that. And so a metallic map, which we'll switch to now, we'll have material 0, 1, metallic, has values of 0, which is black, for not metallic, and then a value of 1, which is metal, or white, that is metallic. And so I'll go through here, same things, there we go. Like that, like that. Nope, come on. Nope, nope. Come on, nope. Sometimes it doesn't like me. No. There we go. All right. And so now we will go back out here, turn this back on, and instead of brown, we will select bright white. Take our hue and our saturation out of this. And we'll just color everything white here. And this is saying that all these parts are metallic. With other maps like roughness or something, you'll have values in between 1 and 0. But usually with metal, it'll just be 1 or it will be 0. There's not really any in between. All right. There we go. Okay. All right, there was which way is the front? This is the front. I should have done this. Please tell me I did this right.
The usual thought while digital modeling. Please tell me I did this right.
Yeah, that is you're gonna have that in your head all the time. As you can tell, it's not the easiest art skills set. There's a lot of work that goes into it. So instead of switching between a bunch of different textures, I'm just gonna go to material preview, and that'll compile all of them together, because that's what's happening in my material here. You'll see that by doing it through the texture painting mode, I automatically added a metal texture and it got plugged into my metallic slider. So now the gold actually looks like metal. Whee! And then I can just tell it how shiny it is by how rough the whole thing is. And if you want to map out where this is rough and this is not rough, or vice versa, you can do a separate roughness map. But for now, I'm just going to kind of keep it about like there. It's a little shiny. There we go. So now we have textured our chest, and we've rigged our chest, and we're ready to animate our chest. So we'll go here, we'll go here, and we'll select our skeleton. We'll pose our skeleton. I'm sorry I'm taking so long.
You're good.
And
Adding more
then
detail to my little doodle. My little
we will
guy.
do
My little dude. My good time boy.
I to insert keyframe, and then we'll do location, rotation, and scale. You don't have to do all these, but I'm just doing them because it covers everything in case I make any minute changes. And then I'll just go to 30 frames and our X to rotate this on the X-axis and open the chest. I scale, and then over the same course, I'll do this. I will that, and then for 30, I will rotate 180
This is good. I can post this on Twitter.
Around the thing, and then I can do that, and then I can do 60. Or let's see, 80. There we go. And now it should rotate, and then I will also make the chest close if I get this bone. and basically I can copy the keyframes by doing Shift D, that duplicates them, and then I can put those over here. So now, if I shorten my loops time, there we go.
Spinning.
You can see there's texture artifacts, but that's generally it. And I'm going to pass it over to Jayden because I've been taking too long.
I have a question.
Yes.
What are some good resources to learn
Blender Guru, we have our whole page on the website, which I actually can pull up because I'm sharing.
You can make the best looking donut in the entire universe. You go to the Blender
So
Guru.
if you go to www.vgdc.org, that's our website, and you go to the Getting Started page, we actually have a lot of resources for getting you started with things. This you'll want to click the Blender, or is this clickable, Naila? Yeah, okay, there we go. So we have our Intro to Blender workshop where I did a lot more of like software like specific stuff, went over all the shortcuts from last year, so you can watch that video. I'll be doing another one for this year a little later, but I figured since not everyone's going to be using Blender that's an artist, why not do a more general one with everything? And then we have as well, you can go into the blender.org documentation, which is the Blender website, or just look up Blender Docs. That'll come up, and there's a whole nice documentation. And then the other one I will recommend that is essential for anyone trying to learn Blender is Blender Guru Donut. You go to the donut tutorial. You can just look up donut tutorial. Basically, this is the one he does for 3D or for 3.0, and he has a whole series where he goes through all the shortcuts and all the fancy stuff, and you make a really nice donut, and you can post it on Twitter and all the social medias at the end of it. It's got a whole 17 video, not that long.
If you've just opened Blender for the first time and then you've tried to
There's so many videos on it.
maybe try to see how far you can go without getting help, you might have discovered you need help immediately.
That voice haunts me in my nightmares.
Yeah. He's a nice, charming guy. He's from Australia, I think. And yeah, so
Finale.
goes all the way through, and at the end, I'll just skip to the very end of it so you can see what kind of like what.
You made it.
He's taught you how to make the best looking donut.
Well, donut.
Here you go.
Is up with our colors. Okay.
Here you go.
We'll just wait for that to finish.
And that's it. It finished, which means you can go to your folder. You should see it. Double click, and
I think,
we did it!
Yeah, that's what you'll do at the end of that.
yeah.
The final animation.
Show us the cool donuts you guys made. It's on the Discord.
You can now upload that to the internet. Like,
You can now upload that to the internet.
But yeah,
Yeah. Do
donuts are really good. We have the link, I think, on our Getting Started page. It's like a resources document down at the very bottom of it. If I, yeah, we're if you have any suggestions to add to this, by the way, you see there's a lot of empty space down here, like sound resources especially. We need some more stuff. But basically, these are all good YouTube and other creators and website resources. Google them, and you'll find some cool stuff.
They're the 2D one.
2D one?
Yeah. I want to see if they have like the one I told Phillips about it.
What is it?
No, they don't have him. His name's like Tommy Urpana.
I'll add them real quick.
Hold on. He makes good stuff.
Is he a social media creator?
Yeah, he's on YouTube.
What's his name?
I'm trying to find it because it's something I cannot pronounce. Tonico Pantoja. It went bad. I told you it wasn't gonna go well, but
Yeah.
they have good not only like Blender tutorials but mainly 2D animation things. Like they're really good stuff. He recently got into doing more Blender stuff, which is why it's like.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's good. I will hand it over to you, Jayden.
Okay, finally, yes. Okay, hi. I drew a little doodle. I've been playing a lot of Breath of the Wild. I have been very badly procrastinating on homework, but that's because I'm doing this. But on top of this, we're gonna do a little fire animation on the torch. It's just like a little thing. This is a Clip Studio Paint tutorial, just because
That's a personal thing I use, and it's what I recommend, especially if you're doing like animation stuff. Definitely go here in terms of personal recommendation, as it has very easy and convenient animation tools. So from going from it, you can pop out this little animation bar that they have for you, which is very lovely. And you can go ahead and add a timeline, and here they'll have the frame rate, how long you want it to go, just really anything you want to edit. And from there, it'll give you this timeline here at the bottom. And that is your frames, and then inside these blue bars is your playback time. So that's similar to whenever the Blender animation was doing it, where it just looped in a certain amount of time. That's the same thing here. So it's going to loop every 25 frames, but I can drag that down. Usually you want to go about 8 frames. I'm just going to do 8 because it's technically I'm doing 4, but I'm going to stretch it out over 1 second, which means I'm going to do, I guess, 8. But it'll be duplicated a bit. So then you want to go ahead and add an animation folder. It's different because then it'll recognize that you want to, that every frame will be different and it'll be a different cell. And then I go ahead and add this, which is our first animation cell. Oh, hey, I'm on camera. And I'll just go ahead and draw a little fire. Little guy.
That's some good fire.
Thank you. I didn't practice. And then I'm also going to assign it at the end, just so, because personally whenever I'm animating, I find it easiest. Obviously, I'm no professional, but I find it easiest to go from out to the middle, especially if it's a looping animation. So with this, I can go straight to, oh my gosh, what did I do? There we go. We can go straight to, what would be the middle tab. So I'm going to go here, add an extra frame, and then this is called onion skin, and it's so that you can see the layer before and after. I forgot which color's which, but it's blue and green. And since they're the same frame before and after, they're both on the same thing, which is why it's this weird teal color. But you can always go back. Why do it keeps going back to where I don't want it to? You're so smart. What did I do? Okay, never mind. We fixed it. God. See, there we go. All those good ideas. But yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and start drawing out what I want the middle frame to be. This is, of course, I would be usually doing this to a TV show while doing it, just because it's a little tiny bit boring sometimes. Not boring, but I guess
It's not UV.
repetitive. Yeah, it's no UV work.
Yeah.
Come on. But now, what we can do is, first of all, this is the play thing, and that's just it at the moment. But it will become better, even better.
We'll go even further beyond.
Exactly. You got it, Mitchell. And now what you can do is, because we have these onion skin layers, there's the blue and the green, and then all you have to do is draw between them, and that gives you your in-between frames. So in-between frames are really important because you can also time them. That's why if you've ever seen like an animation thing with like a really long line and then there's just like lines in between spaced out across what look to be weird intervals, that's because that's their in-between frames, and they're timing it out so that maybe things flow a bit more smoothly. Usually you'll see this at, if you were to throw a ball, whenever it hits, like whenever it's in the air, that is a longer amount of time, but whenever it gets closer to the ground, then it starts to be frame after frame, like very quickly in sequence, because a lot of things are happening where if it's fastly moving, you want it to be here, 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 and then as it's slowing down, you want it to be here, 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 here. So, but if it's evenly spaced out, if it's just a regular thing, you can usually just do what I'm doing, which is going between them at an even rate.
Yeah.
So
Another thing to mention with keys and tweens, which are keyframes, are basically the major frames that she did at the beginning and start, and then the in-between is what she just talked about. So the advantage of 3D animation is basically all you have to do is you set your keyframes. You don't have to do, the computer is what's doing the in-between. You say it, I have point A and I have point B, and I want the computer to take me from point A to point B. And that's the power of it. But 2D, you have to do all the in-betweens yourself.
Exactly. And for this one, we only have 4. So, like, I'm already done with 3 of them. So it's really never, like, and then I can go here. And I have 2. So I have 1 at the end, 1 at the end. 1 at the beginning, 1 at the end. And then, so that's 2 frames. It's taking up 2 of them. And then everything in between, even though it looks a bit longer, those are taking up also 2 at the same time. But like I said, I just split it into 2, 1 at the beginning, 1 at the end. So it's easier to draw like those in-between frames. So I like to go from out to in. But yeah, so there's only 1 left. And I'll do that. This is the quickest fire animation I've done, probably because it's not very good.
As quick and dirty chest I did, so.
Yeah. No, your chest was great, Mitch.
Sure.
Don't put yourself down like that. Okay, so it should look pretty. Okay, I gotta fix the frame rate because it's not going as fast. So in here, when it's pretty easy to set your frame rate because then you can just go to timeline, manage, change frame rate, and depends on what I want, but usually I go with 12 just because I like that. But then you got your little fire, and he goes, and he enjoys his time there. But you can also bump it up a lot. Sometimes I like to just play with it for a really long time and then just go, that looks terrible, but boy, is it moving fast.
It's like music, you could just play something faster.
That's what I'm saying. So I sometimes, like, if I went to 24 frames per second, it's going really, really fast. So I just like to look at it sometimes and just go, wow, that looks really bad. And I wouldn't post that anywhere, but boy, is it interesting. So I just usually go in between and just find the one I really like. Obviously, usually you'd animate to a specific frame rate. This one, because I have it to a frame, like, not to a frame, but 2 frames per every cell, it just would usually go slower, where usually if you had it at 8 frames per second, that animation would be fine if I made one for every of those 8 parts of the second. But this is more like 16 frames per second if you want to compare it to. This is probably the best comparison to each other. This would be it if it was, the 8 frames per second. But yeah, so that's the intro to, I guess, 2D. I'll go more in depth. But that was just a quick one, just so I wasn't like going, you would just see me drawing the whole time. But yeah, so I might post this on Twitter just because I haven't posted on there in years. And you know what they want to see, my 2 followers, is this. But yeah, so any questions you have for 2D animation or just 2D in general, please come talk to me just because I love answering questions about it.
Same for 3D and me, yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah. But we're both technical artists, so we also know that part of it. So any questions about that as well, we're happy to answer. But yeah, so that was our
High five.
demo. God, we're so funny.
So fun.
We're so funny. We did it.
All right,
Pretty happy
any
with how
questions
that
at
turned
all?
out. That turned out all right.
Anything? Everyone's good? We're all star artists? That's great.
Awesome. We did it, guys.
We just imbibed everything around where the
We
crowd
all just,
was.
I was excited to tell you guys, but we all just got hired at Epic.
Oh my god.
All of us. Guys, welcome to the team.
You know,
We
Jayden,
did
that's
it.
pretty epic.
Wow.
Hilarious. For anyone wishing to give us feedback on our wonderful presentation and tell us how funny we were.
Yeah, I was about to say that. So.
Great, you know what they say about great minds, Jayden? They think alike.
Like, yeah.
We said the same thing.
No, that's
That's comedy. If I don't say that I'm funny at least once a day, I might explode.
Self-affirmations.
Yeah, exactly. I need to remind myself that I'm the funniest person alive. People just don't get it, no?
Yeah.
I gotta go.
All right.